Good evening, not yet, good evening, good afternoon. Also from my side, on a Friday afternoon. I always find it fascinating to listen to Phil's presentations. It's kind of going around wide areas, explaining things, telling you the background, evidence, but well, my role here is not to be fascinated. My role here is to be a discussant, to provide some comments. So actually, I read through Phil's slides, which I received, I think, 2 days ago. So between other things I had to do. And I listened carefully to the presentation now and wrote down some notes. There are many things where I agree completely with Phil. Things like the arguments he made at the beginning about the policy arena, about the relationship between policymakers on the one side, academics on the other side. After having the experience of a project where academics were required by the project leader to make some policy recommendations at the end of their papers, and then reading these policy recommendations, I'm sure there is a big gap. So these policy recommendations were just conclusions or summaries, but they showed that these academics had no clue about how policy works. I fully agree with many other things, like when you said that things are much more complex than what you could show here. I fully agree that we need more data, we need more information about these processes, we need them faster, we need more analysis of these processes, we need more communication of these results. We need these analyses repeatedly over time, and we also need them for different regions. So that is important in my view, and I fully agree on that. And I also fully agree on the comments you made about the financial side, the fiscal side. It's one of the real weak spots in regional economics, regional science, which is non-financial, basically. So we are not used to look at the financial side of the economy. We look at the real side. We count the number of people, we count the number of businesses, the number of unemployed, and all these numbers, but we do not really care about the financial side, which was one of the eye-opening things for me when I started to go to real estate conferences, where you always have both sides. So the real kind of regional science type real estate papers, and then the financial papers, where it's all about making money with your real estate investment and how all this is related. So these are very important aspects. But still, my role is to make comments and to be a discussant, to raise a few issues. And I prepared a couple of slides to raise some of these issues. So these are my comments. Well, there's some technical aspects. There are some issues about well, the reliability of the results. So one of the things, it's not me. One of the things that I remember from very early in my academic career where we did work on cities over time, that this city is kind of a moving target. So when cities change, they become larger, and then some areas which were clearly outside the city before become part of the city in a functional form. So then you always have the problem, do you keep a standard definition of your city and then look at what happened there? The problem then is if you make it too small, then you're picking up central city developments and cutting out some of the important things. If you make it too large, you're actually talking about some rural areas. So there's this issue of what is the city and that it changes over time. Well, there's some issues about ratios, growth rates, about the denominator. That's always important. So sometimes I think we should be some more critical about these numbers. What do they really mean? 2% growth rate in Germany means something different than a 2% growth rate in Slovenia or another small country. There's some potential regression to the means issues here with cities as being defined as implicitly being defined as areas which have accumulated population over time. And then when you talk about, well, they are not growing any longer this fast. So there are some issues there. But I think I would rather like to comment on some of the substantial parts of the presentation. And this is the point, well, can we identify something like this shifting economic landscape? Well, we can observe this, but to what extent is this really important structure? How can we distinguish the important from the not so important parts? I think we all agree, and definitely the two of us agree, that place matters, that it makes a difference whether something happens in a city like London or in Milano or in some of the smaller cities or in the rural areas, that the same action, the same event makes a difference because of the spatial structure, because of the interconnectedness, this network element of our economic system. And to a large extent, it's agglomeration economies and agglomeration diseconomies which are the core of our urban, well, actually regional economies of our economic system. And I'm always fascinated by some colleagues from economics who just seem to be happy with defining away agglomeration effects and talking about the economy. And they live in cities, they live in concentrated areas, and still have no problem with that. So I find this fascinating. But the bottom line of this, if we start from this hypothesis that there are these agglomeration economies, these externalities in economic terms, the bottom line is that we are actually talking about the complex dynamic system and its complex dynamics of interdependent nonlinear systems. And these are the networks, these are the mutual influences, the spillovers that we have heard about. And this raises issues of stability and instability. So some of the longer term trends that we see could be just some stable periods which are followed by some unstable periods because some small parameter changed a little bit. Maybe due to some policy, maybe due to some innovation, maybe due to some competitive activity. And so I think we're dealing with a much more difficult and complex set of systems, and I think we are not fully aware of that, and we don't fully understand what that means. And so many of these, as I write here at the bottom, many of these parameters are constantly changing due to innovation, due to competition, due to well, some events which happened. This was 20 years ago at CERN, where Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, which changed commerce, which changed bookselling completely, which changes the airline industry, which changes the travel agency industry. It changed so many sectors, and that has, again, repercussions. So it's these forces, I think, that are very important there. Now, this, when we start from this understanding, does this help us to design policies? Well, I think you mentioned some of these aspects in your presentations. Well, there are three sources of support for policymaking. Number one, it would be good to perfectly understand the mechanisms. I don't think we do. Well, we may agree on the main influencing factors, but probably not on all of them. But we definitely don't agree on the size of the parameters and how big, how important that is. So we have a problem there, and it's very difficult to get the full understanding of this dynamic system when it is constantly changing, when we are faced with the constantly changing environment. And another problem is we cannot just say, okay, these are some of the small influences because of the nonlinear feedbacks, these small changes may blow up to very big changes. This is the famous butterfly effect. So the concentration on the main forces, the main influences, may be quite misleading and lead to some wrong conclusions. Now, second possible source, let's learn from the past. When we have a constantly changing system, the present is always fundamentally different from what we had in the past because the environment has changed, simply because of the actions that were taken in the past. So a policy which influenced the economy in the past has changed the economy so that the same policy applied today probably, or may not, it may work, it may not work, but it's affecting a different economic system. And similarly, from other regions, with this interdependent economy, these interconnections, it's very difficult to learn from other regions for our own policies. So what do we need here? Well, I think this is where we really strongly agree. We need kind of a constant monitoring of these changes. We need to observe what is going on in the spatial economy. We need the respective information. We need to exchange our views on that. We need this in order to understand here is a problem, there is a potential problem, and to react to that. Well, what are some of the measures for that? And I, contrary to Phil, I saved the advertisements for the end. So I'll end with that. One of them is a journal that URSA has started a year and a half ago. It's called Region, and it's an open access journal. It's electronic, so that's really in the public domain, so there is no financial barrier to get access to this information. We also would love to review your papers, so if you have something interesting for the academic community, please submit it to Region. The other thing is we organize conferences, and this has been mentioned in the start. This is the conference we will have in Vienna. Here are the dates, August 23rd to 26th, and the topic is really very attractive for people from the European Union. It's citizen regions, smart, sustainable, inclusive, but we took the liberty to add a question mark because it's an academic conference. And so this will take place at VU, at our new campus, and you get the slight impression here. It's a pretty interesting place. So if you want to come, you're welcome to submit an abstract. We'll start end of next week, the abstract submission. And the last thing I want to mention is another one of my babies. This is the ERSA Journal Archive. We collect metadata of regional science journals, partly because I was just so fed up with the Web of Science when I type in some clearly regional science term like migration, and then I get 2 pages of articles which talk about the migration from one software system to the other, or the migration of some germs in some medical things. So we decided to collect regional science information. So this is regional science type articles that we collect there. And it's also free, so you're welcome to use that. I think that was it, yes.